Hello cruel world. So this is the third of a three-part series about Munchausen's and Munchausen's by proxy, mostly the latter. In my other two videos, I've talked about these diagnoses, I've told you the behaviours and the symptoms, and I've also talked about a real true life case, which is Dee Dee Blanchard. She was murdered, she was stabbed 17 times, and it later turned out that it was her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend who had plotted this. And this happened in June in 2015 in Missouri, and it was quite an unusual case in that the sympathy quickly shifted from Dee Dee from being this caring mother of her daughter and a victim of violent murder to a long-term child abuser, because it was discovered that she had Munchausen's by proxy. She created all these untrue diagnoses and physical illnesses in her daughter. It was also confusing because people were unsure how to categorize Gypsy, the daughter. Was she a victim of the Munchausens or an accomplice to the murder, or both? So this episode today is very different. I'm going to do something that I've not really done before, which is to give you my opinions on a film. The film is Run, which is on Netflix right now. It's a psychological thriller which explores the dynamics and the diagnosis of Munchausen's by proxy. So this is a semi-review. I'm not really reviewing the film as such, although I will tell you my opinions overall. This is more to do with the psychiatry and the psychology, those angles and aspects of the diagnosis, because that's my area of expertise. So my name is Dr. Sohom. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. I'm going to give you a semi-spoiler alert, so I'm not going to intentionally give away too many details about the plot. I'm not going to tell you about any twists unless they're specifically relevant to the psychiatric issues that I want to talk to you about. So probably on balance, I would advise you to not watch this if you haven't seen the film and you want to watch it, but subscribe anyway, you rapscallions. So, for those of you who've seen it, as a very brief summary, it starts off as a nice friendly relationship between a mother and her heavily disabled daughter, which over time becomes sour as it's apparent that the mother is controlling and containing the daughter, and she's starting to find evidence of this. And the mother is faking and using and creating physical illness. So in this film, the mother is called Diane and is played by Sarah Paulson, who is Nurse Ratched. And the daughter is Kira Allen, who is actually a wheelchair user and was paralysed in 2015 for unknown reasons. I think it's really good for inclusivity that the filmmakers used her, because they could have easily used an able-bodied person. I think the casting's good. I think the acting is very good, especially for the mother. So let's address an important point. Firstly, what features of Munchausen's by proxy were shown well in this film? Well, firstly, there was an origin story to why the mother Diane was how she was. So she lost a baby that becomes apparent later on in the film. This explains why she's so overprotective for Chloe. Got to say, I kind of saw it coming as a twist. I think it was a little bit obvious, but that's fine. The other thing was that it hinted at her having a traumatic childhood. So specifically, there's one scene where she's having a shower and there's scars all over her back. It's never really addressed specifically, but I like that. I like the way that it's hinted at. You should show rather than tell. I think the other way that it was portrayed well was that everybody seemed to know the mother and daughter and the situation. So the postman, the pharmacist, they all knew Diane and Chloe by name, which would be typical for Munchausen's, because the actual process of having sympathy gives them status in the community, in the whole community. In fact, that's one of the motivations, as you will have learned from my previous videos, which you've definitely watched. The other thing is that mother has medical skills, if I remember this correctly. I think it's mentioned that she's worked as a nurse in the past, or maybe I'm just getting confused with Nurse Ratched, I'm not sure. And also she does seem devoted to Chloe, which again would be typical. She looks for sympathy and attention, and also she needs to feel powerful and in control. So her need for control is shown in obvious ways, such as locking Chloe in a room at times, and also in subtle ways, such as covering up Chloe's acceptance letters to university, which again, I have to say, I kind of thought I saw that coming a little bit. And also cutting off the internet would be another example of subtle controls. The other thing that was indicated well was doctor shopping. So there's a scene near the end when Chloe's in hospital and a doctor notes that she's had several primary doctors, which often happens because people who commit the behaviours of Munchausen's, they don't want to be caught and they want to have the sympathy. So when a doctor starts getting suspicious, they move on to another one. And the other thing was that the mother and daughter were quite isolated. There was only the two of them in the house and they kind of lived in the middle of nowhere. And again, this is very common because you're more likely to get away with it in an isolated, small area as opposed to a big family or living in a busy, frenetic environment where people might be able to discover your illness faking behaviours. So those are all the things that I thought were done well, which begs the question, what were the features of Munchausen's by proxy that were not shown well, or what features were not typical of Munchausen's? So generally, the perpetrators of Munchausen's have poor self-esteem and they struggle with anxiety, and Diane was not like this. She was very confident, she was very comfortable. So in the very first scene, she's in this support group and she's being very cocky and confident, and even though she is deceiving them, it's just the way she comes across would not be typical. She's also very violent at times in the film. There's this one particular scene, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. And again, this would not be typical. So unless they had something like an antisocial personality disorder, or if Diane was a clinical psychopath. And I suppose it's possible, but Munchausen's by proxy is extremely rare and psychopaths are not quite as rare, but still very rare. So the chances of one person having both of those disorders is plausible, but it's extremely unlikely. However, obviously I understand this is a film, so you have to make it exciting. So I'm not causing any beef, I'm just saying that it's unlikely. By the way, if you're interested in psychopaths, I've done a whole series of films about them. I've talked about high profile cases and real life cases of psychopaths that I have assessed, and one particular person that I tried to rehabilitate. You should go and watch my videos. Spoiler alert, he actually escaped from the secure unit I was working with. I've only really got one medical gripe for this movie, so only one thing that I think is unplausible from a medical point of view, which is this. At the very end, we see Chloe 7 years later, and she's stronger, but she's still struggling to walk. She goes up to this kind of prison in a wheelchair and she hobbles off on a walking stick. That doesn't make sense to me because her mother was using dog tranquilizers or anesthetics to make Chloe's legs numb. So she should have got over it and her legs should have fully resolved, probably within days or weeks, but definitely within years, because these are short-acting drugs. That's what you want from a tranquilizer by nature, isn't it? You don't want something to have long-lasting effects. You could argue that usage over time would damage her, but I don't think that's how it works, because from my limited knowledge of it all, and remember I did go to medical school, it's all about kind of muscle reluctance. So it's about causing muscles to relax instead of contract. There's no actual involvement of nerves itself, so there's no physiological reason that she shouldn't be able to walk. I would say my main gripe with this film, and probably the only thing that I wasn't really a fan of, was the ending of Chloe force-feeding the same tablets to Diane. It's kind of clever and it's an interesting twist, so I get why they chose to do it. So basically she went into what I think was an infirmary wing of a prison. Firstly, there appeared to be no kind of guards or observations, which just doesn't make sense. Even if it was a prison, even in the healthcare section, I've worked on healthcare units in prison, there are guards around. They might not be sort of eagerly watching everything that's going on, they might be quite lax, but it appeared that Chloe and Diane were in a room by themselves, so that was a bit unrealistic. Also, I didn't really get how Chloe was forcing Diane to take these tablets, because Diane could have refused. If she was taking the same tablets as Chloe, which it appears she did, then maybe her legs would be sort of paralysed, but she'd be able to speak, she'd be able to shout, she'd be able to refuse tablets. She'd even be able to close her mouth so that she could refuse the tablets. And she could refuse visits from Chloe if she thought that Chloe was feeding her these tablets. Personally, on a separate but connected note, I didn't like the way that Chloe finds revenge in such a callous and evil way. Now, it's not because I don't think Diana doesn't deserve bad things happening to her, and it's not because I'm too sensitive for the concept of this woman being kind of tortured in this way. It's because I think it taints Chloe as a character. It is quite an evil thing to do, and it's out of character of the rest of her personality for most of the film. I think a more unique and clever and intelligent and relevant ending would have been for Chloe to move on with her life and ignore her mother being Diane. So, for example, there was some sort of family reunion and Diane turned up years later, and then when Diane approaches Chloe, she genuinely either dismisses her or barely remembers her, and nobody else in the family has ever heard of Diane. I think that would have been more impactful because Diane relies on Chloe for attention, for emotion. Basically Chloe is her life, so I think that would have made a more dramatic emotional ending than Chloe just copying what Diane does. Anyway, that's what I think. My wife actually, who I saw this with, disagreed. She thought it was an apt ending. Tell me what you think in the comments below. So before I come to conclude this video, first let me formally introduce you to this channel. This is a Psych for Sore Minds. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders in courts and in prisons and in psychiatric units. This channel addresses a whole range of mental health topics, from individual diagnoses to interviewing people with real mental health issues to talking about high-profile criminal cases. Some of my videos are about crime and offending because that's the area I work in. Some of them are about more common mental illnesses. There's something for everybody on this channel. So to conclude, I thought Run overall was a very good film. It's quite short and it was never boring. So that's how I judge a film. Often when I'm watching films, I'm kind of wanting it to end. I'm looking at the clock. This kept me engaged the whole time. And it was quite clever because there was not much conversation. In fact, there wasn't even really that many characters, and other characters only appeared for short periods of time apart from the two leads. Having said that, even though it was good, it was also slightly forgettable for me. I didn't really think about it after I saw it, for example, the next day. One thing it did very well is show, not tell. So I mentioned before a scene with Diane in the shower with scars on her back. That was a perfect example. It didn't go into her background, didn't have to, it just made the viewer think. Another scene that jumps out to my memory was when she was driving along at the time that Chloe was trying to escape, and there was like a brown bag from a Home Depot store, and the viewer never got to see until later what was in it. In fact, I don't think they got to see it at all, and I think that's quite clever because it had you thinking, like, what's in that bag? It wasn't obvious. It kind of hid things to make the viewer think a bit deeper. So overall, I would give this film an 8 out of 10. I thought there was really good tension throughout, especially in some scenes. In Rotten Tomatoes, it got 89%, which I think is a reasonable score. It's a bit high for me. I didn't think it was quite, 9 out of 10 material, but it's reasonable. From a psychiatric perspective, I think it got most elements of Munchausen's by Proxy correct. I think it did it well. I think it was decent and pretty engaging. So what I'm trying to say is, if you've got Netflix, it's free for you. You should go watch Run. Right, I'm about to say goodbye. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Not only does it help me out immeasurably, but it actually reduces your blood pressure. Plus, you have to tell your favourite people about Psych for Sore Minds because they deserve it. Spread the love. Until next time, stay euthymic, and please remember, I love you.